be sure to check out my second channel called Rob Explains. There you can check out videos where I explain things outside of comic books. So as we continue our discussion on Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four, we pick up now with issue number 574. And what I want to do, and at least what I've done in the last video, is in the description, I actually put a reading list as well as a link to where you can buy this on Comixology, because to be quite frank with you guys, these videos I think will be entertaining if you haven't read the Fantastic Four from Jonathan Hickman, but it's also something that I suggest you read on your own, just because you can do it at a leisurely pace, and there'll be a couple things here and there that I'll be required to pass over. But because the story is so good, again, this is something I highly suggest you guys buy. But with this particular comic, we actually start out with the birthday of Franklin Richards. Now, this is why I love Jonathan Hickman's stories so much, because he doesn't forget the small things. And what I mean here is that with the Fantastic Four being Marvel's original superhero team, they've been around for decades, and their stories have seen a multitude of different things take place. They've done everything from fight street-level heroes to take on Galactus and deal with cosmic and even multiversal level threats. There was even a story where the Fantastic Four went beyond the multiverse and visited the One Above All, which is the comic a lot of people reference when they say that the One Above All is Jack Kirby. But with Jonathan Hickman, he reminds us that despite the fact that they've done these incredible things, they're still human. They're still, on a basic level, people. They have thoughts, they have feelings, they have emotions, they have children to take care of. And with Franklin Richards, this is especially important. And the reason why I think this matters so much is with Franklin as a character, most anyone who's ever read anything about Marvel Comics or has a passing interest has looked at the character of Franklin and been enamored by the powers that he possesses. As a child, he's effectively able to control the Marvel Universe depending on who you talk to. He's actually the reason why characters don't age. But with the abilities that he displays, it's very easy to look over the fact that he's still a kid. And so with this birthday issue, what we get is Valeria Richards giving Franklin Richards a present, but then also revealing that this birthday party is a surprise birthday party. Now again, with this whole celebration, we see a mishmash of different characters show up. And while we don't need to go through all of them, some of the characters that seem to appear here are both Power Pack as well as Leech. Now, with Power Pack, for those of you guys who don't know, there was a point in time where Marvel was reaching out to the younger audience space, and I don't mean teenagers, I actually mean little kids. And what they did is they created a superhero team called Power Pack, which included Franklin Richards, but also had various other heroes involved. Now, I've got a video on Power Pack, I believe, that you're welcome to check out, and if I have that video, I'll post it in the description. But with the character of Leech, in my mind, I think he's actually one of Marvel's most powerful mutants. By his very nature, Leech is what's called a Morlock, meaning he has a physical deformity, which keeps him from being able to live on the surface, and instead, he lives in the tunnels. But the power of Leech is to actually shut off the powers of other people. And as far as we know in Marvel Comics, there's no limit to this. And so it could be that he could take on Apocalypse and simply just shut off Apocalypse's access to his powers, immortality, different things like that. He could take on someone with insane abilities. Whether or not he could stop Jean Grey from being the Phoenix is something we don't know. And I don't think that situation's ever been explored, although I would be interested to see that comic. But Leech is very formidable just because of the fact that he can turn off other people's abilities. But in addition to this, and something that I also like you guys to take note of here, is Spider-Man. One of the funny gags with this is that Ben Grimm basically introduces all the children to Spider-Man, and they react exactly the way we would expect them to. The kids say, "That's not Spider-Man," and of course, the real Peter Parker shows up. But the reason why this matters is I would like you to pay particular attention to how Franklin Richards relates to Spider-Man, because there is a beautifully written issue later on in this story where Franklin Richards spends time with Spider-Man. And we get some very in-depth views into how Peter Parker views his life after the death of Uncle Ben. But this relates to the fact that Johnny Storm will actually die later on, which is kind of a spoiler here. But that of course takes place during the Annihilation storyline, which again, will tie in here in a little bit. But with Franklin Richards spending time with Spider-Man, they just kind of hang out, and there's really not a whole lot to go on here, not a whole lot to celebrate. Of course, he takes him on a ride through the town, which happens off panel. We don't really see that, but once the two of them return, we see a little bit of banter back and forth between Peter Parker and Johnny Storm. And this again, for those of you guys who are currently reading the Spider-Man run, is where a lot of this stuff hails from. Even though they're not necessarily the best of friends at this point in time, they are still extremely good friends. And so as we continue on with our run of Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four with issue 574, we actually pick up later on that night. And this is where the story gets cool. What happens is because the technology of the Fantastic Four allows them to basically monitor everything that goes on within and without the Baxter building on a global scale, the building is met with a timequake condition red. Now, while Hickman doesn't tell us exactly what this means, we can basically just infer that somebody's opening a portal somewhere, and indeed, that's exactly what happens. But the individual that shows up completely incapacitates the Fantastic Four. Now, while he doesn't necessarily beat them, he puts up a force field that they can't get past. And when I was reading this, I was like, oh my God, who is this guy? Like, what's going on here? And we don't find out until later on. But what happens is while Susan Storm tries to get past this, while Reed Richards puts his mind to the test, Ben Grimm tries to pummel through it. There's nothing they can do, but more notably, whenever they punch a hole through a wall to try to get around it, the force field expands to fill that hole. So they're basically never ever going to get through. But from here, we see Franklin Richards as a child actually step out into the hallway trying to figure out what's happening. Now again, one thing to keep in mind here is that Franklin doesn't have powers. He's just a young kid. He's just a boy. And so while the Fantastic Four call out to this guy and try to get him to stop, he murmurs something to Franklin Richards and effectively lifts him into the air. Now from here, the man goes into the bedroom of Valeria Richards. Now again, Valeria is a character who is wildly intelligent in the realm of Marvel Comics. In fact, she is right up there with Reed Richards and Dr. Doom, and is probably one of the smartest people, probably the #1 smartest person on the planet when everything's taken into account. And in fact, during Hickman's run of Secret Wars, Valeria Richards was the one that came to the conclusion that the incursions cannot be stopped. Reed Richards didn't come to that conclusion first, it was actually her. Now Reed, of course, didn't want to listen to it. He wanted to preserve his reality, but at the end of it all, he had to accept her calculations as being absolutely true. But what this man says to Valeria Richards is that the future must be avoided at all costs. Now again, this is classic Jonathan Hickman. This is really just him telling us stuff, and we have no clue what's going on. So if you feel yourself being confused, don't feel bad. It's the nature of Hickman's stories, but all of this will begin to make sense as things go on. Now, what he says to her is that there will be a war between the 4 cities, and that those who died cannot be forgotten. Now, this is something that I really want you to pay attention to, because the next thing he tells her is that all hope lies with Dr. Doom. And this is the craziest thing. This is the craziest situation. But again, all of this will be made to make sense. But what ends up happening is as he begins to make his way out, he begins to leave. Valeria catches up with him and she says happy birthday, which tells us this is the adult version of Franklin Richards. And so once everything begins to calm down, once this version vanishes and the portal disappears, and Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, Johnny Storm, and Susan Storm get with the kids and they basically put them back to bed, the conversation becomes, who is that guy and why was he able to shut everything down? Now from here, we also take note of the fact that Valeria Richards has her own little calculations on how to solve the problem of everything, and while this isn't very important right now, this will be very important later on. But more notably than this, what we learn is that the words that the adult Franklin Richards muttered to his younger self was to rest and remember who he was. And this is why I love this story so much, or love this comic, because what's happened here is the adult Franklin Richards has woken up the powers of his younger self. Now we'll actually learn later on that other things are happening, that he actually mentioned other things to him, and we'll learn there's a lot more to the situation than what's initially being revealed to us. But because Franklin Richards' powers have been restored to him, the first thing he does is create a pocket universe in the bedroom of his room. Now how awesome is that? With that being said, guys, I really hope you feel the excitement in this comic, because this is such a cool story, and it really only gets better from here. It just keeps going up and up and up, and it leads to this amazing finale. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end, and if you guys are enjoying this Hickman's Fantastic Four, drop a like and a comment. It's always a good thing if you guys do that, and I will catch you all later. Peace.